Good morning. It is August 7th, 2024. This is Project Blue devlog number 9. Sticking to what I mentioned last time, I'm going to be doing these at more of a feature-based cadence, although this one happened to land close to a week out anyway, so not too different in the pacing here, but there is a moderate amount to cover, so let's jump into it. I'll start by going for visual demonstration. Visually, or maybe not visually, functionally, the new things that have been added is a more proper implementation of a jump. So what you'll see here is that if I hit on the up key, there's a windup followed by, in this case, a sort of falling animation that is, I'm gonna say it's like the cookie cutter fall animation. If you don't know, man, it comes with a lot of pre-made animations. This one that's playing right now is just being ran through the animation blueprint, and it is the animation sequence that Manny comes with for falling. Something to know about this jump is that it is committal. Once I'm in the air like this, I cannot change my air control, which is something that I'd already kind of set up, but I just want to point out it's not a regression. It's being implemented in that way. Another thing too is that we're now reading the input for left or right at the time of the jump, like actually executing as the launch. So like during that windup, we're curious to know, are they holding left or right? If not, or if so, do the corresponding jump. So if I do back jump, which is, I start the jump and I hold back. Sorry, there we go. You'll see it's the same animation. You can kind of tell that it's also a cookie cutter from like a system level because the hitboxes are not changing. Basically, all I mean by that is from a state level, Manny is going into the idle animation, or not the idle animation, but the idle state, in which case the animation blueprint just takes over, and so that's why the hitboxes don't reflect anything there. If I slow it down, you can see that the windup is a proper state. We've got like an actual square that's defined for that crouched pose. But you might have noticed I'm kind of dancing around it. There's actually a forward jump that I haven't shown yet, and that is the one that is more properly implemented. So I'll do that one in slow mode too, just so you can look at it. I have not implemented hurt boxes for it yet. But you can see there is, I guess it's not the best demonstration because you're like off screen for a lot of it. But you can see that it is a distinct animation for that first half, and then it's transitioning into that generic one. You see how this jump has a more side view angle, whereas the forward jump keeps more of that sort of like, I think it's called a 2/3 profile, and then it switches to the side view. Not side view, it's not the views changing, but Manny is angling himself differently. That's just because I'm currently, although it's not yet implemented, I'm currently looking to make it so each jump has like 3 steps to it. There's the windup, which is going to be the same for all animations. It's just the squat pose, basically. Then there will be kind of like a launch pose, which will include like the upward trajectory. And then there will be a downward one. And I think I am going to let the animation blueprint handle that still, but it's going to need... Well, not the animation blueprint itself will need this touch-up, but the state machine, the state orchestrator, is going to need a touch-up as far as how it handles these sort of persistent states that exist currently. Like right now, I don't think I've ever spoken to this, but the forward, there's like clearly a forward walk animation, right? That's something I've implemented, but it's actually not a distinct state from just idling, which is why the hitboxes don't change at all. And that isn't a big deal because this animation is so like consistent with the idle animation that they're about right, but it seems like a good place for some logic updates so that if I wanted to, maybe I want the character to strut in a way that isn't reflective of how they stand still. In that case, I might want the hurt boxes to change accordingly. So that's something, you know, to be done. Let's see, I can demo that it does work okay on this side too, which, I mean, you're obviously not seeing it, but this was something that needed to be fixed in its own right. It's the fact that the forward jump and the back jump and all that wasn't recognized quite correctly when on the other side of the player, or the other side of the enemy. Yeah, and so that kind of covers the visual side of it. I guess to sort of touch on, you know, what's happening now in the code, other than just like the animation stuff, you know, that, I mean, that's not code even. None of this is code. but there is code now, actually. So let's see. So in the state orchestrator, we go into the event graph. Execute state is kind of like the big enchilada here. This is like what does most of the logic. I've also got apply hitboxes, which is currently only for like the persistent states, like I mentioned. But it's sort of like a hacky solution where walking is just the same thing as idling, basically. So it's, or actually no, sorry, that's not even really like the right way to explain it. Apply hitboxes is how the persistent state, like idling, is used, and then the idea of walking forward or following don't exist at all in the state machine. It's just the animation blueprint reading values like forward velocity or is falling, which live on the character movement object. So anyway, the big enchilada event, as I was talking about, is execute state 1. It, you know, spawned all the hit groups, timers, the shift timers, which I think are new, right? Let me see. Yeah, okay, so cool, we can talk about this. Shift timers, I mean, given their name, you can kind of imagine they work very similar to hitbox timers, where I'm now spawning an object to then execute a series of functions on timers, because I can't have all the timers live off of here or else they'll just override each other. But a shift timer, very small object, just like the hitbox timers, maybe even smaller. Basically, we're just applying a launch character function on the player character, using a new little helper function that lives off a player character and applying it to the vector we feed in. So this is how Manny's jump is being executed. And if I go into the data table, at the right level, you can actually see a shift in the wild. So currently I think these only live on the jump forward and the far jab. Actually, I can show that real quick too. So you might remember jab was the move, the first like attack move I had, and it was really bad frame-wise. It still probably is really bad frame-wise, but now there's a little bit of a jolt, so it gives it like a little bit of a kind of a dash element that makes it more viable. I can use this to kind of close the gap and then cancel on the kicks. You get like 5 free kicks in it or however many. So yeah, that's like an example of how a shift might be implemented. Nothing else had to change. It's just at a certain frame, which is, if I run it in slow-mo, it's going to be like just as the punch actually comes out. So you can see how, you know, a shift might be applied to a move and not just like a jump. You know, easy example is like in Street Fighter we use Shoryuken, where he does like a big uppercut up into the air, or his, what is it, Tatsumaki, where he does like the tornado kick going forward. So plenty of use cases for a move like this, or for a piece of functionality like this. I might need to replace it though with, or replace it from being a launch character. I've noticed maybe some unwanted side effects of this approach, which I'll highlight later. But yeah, that's kind of the piece. You might have noticed too in the states, you know, jump, wind up, jump forward. Well, I already talked to this. The wind up is being used in determining like midway if it's a jump forward or a backward or a straight up, but currently only jump forward exists as a proper state. So to that point, I would like to actually highlight how we get from jump wind up to jump forward, because previously there was no way to like segue between states like that. It was always like input based, you know, like a punch could cancel into a kick, but that was still dependent on you kicking. You know, punch doesn't just become kick, you would return to idle. Have to do a different input. So what's going on here now, because I like to go on tangents and miss the original point I was trying to make, is this big enchilada code. There's now a new node called run custom logic. And what we're doing here is we're actually taking the name, which I've converted into an enum. This used to be a name data type, now it's an enum. I did this just because when you're passing around like a string or a name that is then being used, like pulled into code to like look something up, it could be, I found it to be a little obnoxious because references don't get updated, right? If it's just a string, it doesn't know that it's a reference to something, even though I'm using it like that. It's now this, you know, it's just floating text basically. So we're making it an enum. If I say want to reference the name of states in somewhere, and I'm correctly following the paradigm of using this enum, I only have to update it in the enum, and it should then cascade everywhere else. So that's all I'm calling out there. But now we have this run custom logic node, and what it does is it appends CL underscore, and I don't know if I'm going to keep this paradigm because I have not been using abbreviations and function names until now, but this is, you know, what it is. And it's calling this function called call function by name. And the exciting thing about this is this is not innate to Unreal. I did have to like look up tutorials both on how to get it set up as a C++ project, as well as how to implement the method itself. But this is officially now a blueprint project that was updated to have C++ source files. So I believe if I double click this, oh yeah, I disabled this. Can I just open it then? Go to definition. Is there any way to overwrite that without turning it off? Because I don't want to do that later. Okay, whatever. I already opened up Visual Studio. But yeah, so now you can actually see where that function is. It's on a new class called Advanced Actor, which is just a child of, you know, the traditional actor class that lives in Unreal by base. So right now we just have this new function that's returning a bool, takes in an object reference, which by default is just going to be itself, as well as a function name. And so you can see that's what we're doing here. I don't know about this target reference. It might be that my object declaration is redundant. It kind of seems like it should be, since they're passing in self by default either way. But then I don't know how to reference that target. I was just following like a forum post that kind of did this implementation, so it might be something I revisit. It seems like maybe the default arguments of a class or of a function set up on a class have changed since that post, but either way, it gets the job done. We're now, if we go back in here, we're now looking through that object, finding the function via its name, and executing it, and then returning either true if it is able to execute, or false if we cannot find the function, or if the object itself is not even valid. So super handy, because that is what allows me to do this custom logic execute. I'm giving it the state name, and if it happens to have custom logic, we do it. And if it doesn't, we just exit out of the function traditionally. And I do have a print statement here, but that's more for debug purposes. It's not actually an issue that there was not custom logic. The majority of things do not have custom logic. You can see no custom logic for far jab, none for close kick, none for standing hit reaction. But jump doesn't give that error. That's because we're using it. So how are we using it for the jump? Well, it's really the jump wind up. Actually, I think if I do a jump forward, you'll see jump forward doesn't have one. It's the jump wind up specifically where we're using it. So what does that look like? Well, because jump windup is the name of the state, we have the function already named here called CL underscore jump windup. What does jump windup do? It waits until the frame in which we're doing a launch or like when we want the jump, or not. Yeah, wait, I wonder if this can be streamlined. Originally what it was doing is it was waiting until like it's waiting till the duration of the montage is over, basically. The startup is only 4 frames. So 4 frames divided by 60 gets us to here. In which case we're then calling other custom function. And I'm not sure if this is the paradigm I want to maintain either, but basically this CL underscore is necessary because of how we're looking up custom logic for any given state. CL jump launch, sorry, I was talking about wind up, I was hovering launch though, but I meant jump wind up is that way. Jump launch though is just kind of like a child function, you could say, of jump wind up. It needs to be a separate function because we're calling it off a timer. But there's, you know, an argument then that it shouldn't use the CL pattern, but I also think because it is a child of a custom logic function, it sort of should. Like, I want this function tab over here to kind of be legible. You know, as I'm working in here, this sidebar gets wider and wider, and I think it makes it harder to skim through and actually see what all is being handled in the class. Also call out too, I don't know if this really should be in the state orchestrator. As it is right now, this kind of implies that the state orchestrator is actually specific to Manny because some of these values are particular to them, like the launch value. That's going to be character specific. So either I have to pass this in to the state orchestrator at some point, or like retrieve it off the player character, or state orchestrators will have to be broken up into like a parent and children classes, or like an interface or something where like a lot of this broad logic is on the top level and this specific piece, this custom logic, lives on the child classes, but haven't really figured that part out yet. Anyway, we wait 4 frames and we execute this custom logic. This is then where we are determining which jump state to apply. And this is, as I said, there's only a forward state, and then there are 2 like placeholder implementations. So yeah, I would say like this, like don't try to like read through every little branch of this. Just know that like we're taking in, are they holding right? Are they holding left? These are 2 new booleans that are being processed at the event tick for player character, and also are they facing right? Which we can then extrapolate. Are they facing left? And so all this boolean logic is just doing that. And we're saying if they're holding both right and left, or if they're holding neither, we do a neutral jump. There's no x velocity, as we can see here. If they're exclusively holding one of them, then we have to figure out which one they're holding, and as well as which way they're facing. And basically, if we come to the conclusion that they're holding forward relative to how they're facing, we'll execute the actual proper state, and if they're not, then we'll just launch them. And so they technically stay in the idle state, but the animation blueprint handles the falling animation as I called out, so. Yeah, that more or less covers the current side of this. Or the current implementation thus far. I thought it was a pretty decent breakpoint. I could have maybe like finished like the forward falling animation, but I kind of think that's just going to be a matter of adding a new animation and then figuring out persistent logic for the state orchestrator, which that'll be interesting. But that'll probably be the next thing I make a video on, so I'll look forward to that. I think that about covers it. I'll do one more skim through my notes. Oh yeah, I guess one last thing. I mentioned before I had concern about how launch character was being used. I don't think it's maybe... It seems fine for jumping, but the concern is around how I was using it like in that jab. So you might have noticed when I land, it says airtime 0.99 with a little bit of variance in it, which in itself is kind of concerning, but I'm not really looking to crack that can of worms open just yet. But yeah, I'm on an event tick, I'm checking if they're in the air, and if they're not, then I start like a timer, and then once they're back on the ground, then or I think I said that wrong, but I think you get the idea. Once they leave the ground, timer starts. Once they touch the ground, we print the timer. The concern is not with jumping, but it's with this dash on the jump. We're actually getting just a smidge of airtime. And I think that what is happening here is the launch character, even though I'm not applying any vertical like impulse to this shift, it seems like launch character might do that inherently to maybe overcome innate friction on the ground, like because that's kind of just a built-in value on all character movement. They might have done that as a way to like remove a higher disparity. It's like if you had a launch character, actually you can kind of see it when I jump and then do it. You see I go flying, right? Because I don't have any friction like holding me back, and that's definitely extreme. So that's a another good example of like why maybe launch character isn't good. It cares too much about friction, which also might suggest that I just need to figure out how to truly turn it off, or work around it, I should say. I'm using friction. That's what's stopping the character from like gliding along the ground. If I turn friction low, I would like glide without any input. But I don't know how to like turn it off and then just have movement be this sort of basic function, I guess, where I'm just like actually just moving at a set pace, you know, and not worrying about how much resistance the ground is giving me. So that'll need to be assessed. It might have to do with like doing actor offset stuff, which is how this collision's being done. There's actually just like there's like just a bunch of micro collisions going on here, and it's like every time a collision happens, they're pushing the other player character away. So it might be something in that realm, but I have not really dug into it yet. So another thing for the near future. As always, thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.